Good morning, children. In this session, we are going to start the next chapter, that is friction. Already the force and pressure chapter was completed by all means, and you must have completed all the work in your fair copy. Here we will start this friction chapter. The word friction was already discussed in the last chapter. In the force and pressure, the frictional force was also discussed, because in the type of force on the basis of physical contact force and a non-contact force. I gave two examples for contact force. One was muscular force, another one is frictional force. So from that point of view, we say friction is also a force. Friction is also a force. And friction is the contact force. Because the friction play its role whenever two things, two surfaces, two objects comes in contact with each other. Without contact, friction cannot play its role. If I want to lift this pen, I must have contact with the pen. My finger must touch the pen. If I am not touching the pen, then we cannot find the friction between finger and the pen. So we say friction is a contact force. And that also discussed that what frictional force is doing. In one example, I told that on a surface, a ball is placed. When this ball is kicked from this direction, once I kick the ball comes in motion. The ball is rolling on the ground. Now it is moving on the ground. It is in contact with the ground. And its direction of motion is here. When you see the rolling motion of this ball, you find the speed of ball continuously decreases. But no one is touching it. Still the speed is continuously decreases. Finally it comes to rest. Finally the ball is stopped. To stop the ball, the force must be applied. So that means on the ball some force was applied. That's why it is stopped. The force is not coming from anywhere. No other forces are acting. But still it is stopped. It is because it is in contact, in touch with the ground. So the ground must be applied the force to stop the ball. First the speed was decreasing and it is stopped. To decrease the speed of motion of the ball, the force must be applied in the opposite direction. So that means the ground is applying force on the ball in the opposite direction of motion of the ball. Ball was moving in this direction, but the force applied by the ground is in the opposite direction. And that force which oppose the motion of ball on the ground, we say that is the force from the ground opposes the relative motion. Relative motion means the ground, with respect to ground, the ball is moving. And this force from the ground opposes that relative motion. So here we can say the friction opposes the motion of ball. Friction from the ground opposes the motion of ball. So from this example we can define what is friction. Friction is a force acting between two surfaces in contact. It is acting between two surfaces. One is earth, another one is ball. Friction is the force acting between two surfaces in contact when one is moving on the other. One more word should also be included. Friction is the opposite force acting between two surfaces in contact when one is moving on the other. That is the definition of friction. So friction opposes the relative motion. Relative motion. Relative motion means with respect to ground the ball is moving. If I take this example, on my hand the pen is moving. Now with respect to my hand the pen is moving. So that we say relative motion. So this is the friction. And this frictional force acts applied between all surfaces which are in contact, in which one is moving on the other. Means when you try to move the pen on the board, there is friction between the pen and the board. When you try to lift anything, when you try to lift book from the bag, between the finger and the book, friction acts. If I try to lift the pen, there is friction between finger and the pen. Friction plays between all the surfaces which are in contact, in which one moves or tends to move on the other. So that means we can say generally friction is everywhere between all surfaces. In our surrounding, we observe many things in which one is moving on the other. Now we will see this friction which arises due to what? Why does the friction comes in between the two surfaces? How does it plays its role? How does one surface oppose the motion of another? That we must discuss. And then we will discuss friction, it opposes the motion. Okay. But this friction is having many advantages in our daily life and also disadvantages. That means friction is necessary for many of the activities in our daily life. So we consider the friction as a friend. But in some cases, friction is not necessary. It is not required at all. In some cases. In that cases, we say the friction is an enemy. it is a foam. So the friction is required and not required. We must see that examples. Then friction exists between all surfaces means it acts between solids, liquids, and also in gases. That is all states of matter. Between all states of matter, the friction exists. And the role of friction is to oppose the relative motion of one surface on the other. That is the main function, main role of this friction. And then we'll come to know about on what factors friction depends. Can we change the friction between two surfaces? Means, can we increase or decrease the friction between two surfaces? That also discussed in the continuing session. So